Friends, I am excited to be able to share this particular message with you all today. As I've reflected on this, I really do feel genuinely that this is one of the most important sermons that I will ever share. And that does not come lightly. I've had, hate to say it, but almost 30 years of ministry. And have shared a lot of things with folks. But really, the more that I reflected on this particular sermon, the more that I feel this is one of the most important, maybe the top 5 that I've ever shared. And so just encourage you to really take this in today. It kills me that we don't have a lot of time. We'll probably go over because this is such an important topic. The question that we're asking today is, what is love? Now, the Beatles, you may remember, used to croon, "All we need is love." Love actually has been proven by many psychological and behavioral science researchers to be absolutely essential, particularly when children are very young, that early stage of life from infancy to about 5 years old. If a child experiences unconditional love during those first 5 years, their brain changes for the better. And it contributes to all manner of facets of mental health. When they do not experience that kind of love, it shifts them. It changes the physical brain structure. And it's not for the good. Love is absolutely essential in our lives. That's no surprise, since Jesus, right here in this last passage in Luke's Gospel, condenses the entire Bible, all of God's commands, all of God's words, to just 2 things. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love is, without a doubt, one of the most important things that we can ever experience or do for others. But the question is, what is love? Now, that's what this individual asked Jesus, in essence. What is the most important thing we do? And then he asked, well, what does that look like? And Jesus shared with him the story of the Good Samaritan. It's a question I think in our culture is absolutely critical to ask, because we have so many misconceptions in our culture about love. Let me just give you some examples. How do we here in American culture use the term love? I love my children. I love pizza. I love football. I love our neighbors. They're such great people, great friends. I love my spouse. I love my girlfriend. I really love that outfit, that makeup, or those items of jewelry. I love God. I love golf. I love to host and to serve others and to bless them. So many different ideas there, but we use just one encompassing term, the idea of love. The Greeks, fortunately, were much more detailed in their use of the term. We have anywhere from 7 to 10 different words highlighted in various Greek texts from Jesus' day. Scholars debate on which were present before or after Jesus came along. But as I did research, I found as many as 10 different terms that could possibly have been used by the Greeks in Greek culture, in the culture that Jesus grew up in. And it details many of these. For example, I love my children. The Greeks had a term called storge. It was a familial love, a bond between parents, children, between siblings, between other members of a family. I love football. The Greek term is actually mania, where we get that English term. Or we sometimes talk about fanatics. a fan. I love our neighbors. They're great friends. Phileo, talking about relationships, friendship. Again, close bonds, but in a different way from family. We have romantic love. We have the term eros for erotic love. We have thelema, a strong desire to do things. When people say, oh, I love golf, or I love tennis, or I love to eat ice cream. We have xenia, a term of serving. I love to host, I love to serve other people, I love to bless other people. There's even a term for self-love, as Jesus talked about loving oneself. Philatia is a different term. And then finally we have agape. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. But one thing that's interesting as we look at both the American idea of love in our culture, and even most of these terms in the Greek, though they had them differentiated out more specifically, almost in every sense, in every case, love is defined as a feeling, a romantic feeling, a feeling of love between family members, a feeling of desire to do something or to engage in something, a passion about a sports team. It's a feeling-based, a response to something that happens from the outside coming in. And that's true in both cultures, American and Greek. Now, that creates a bit of a problem for us as we look at the definition that Jesus uses in terms of love, because Jesus gives us a command, as we heard a moment ago. Katie was sharing with us John 15. My command is this: love as I have loved you. Now, let's just play with that idea for a moment, because if love, as we have defined it in our culture, really is a feeling more than a command, how can that be commanded? You know, if I were to walk up to one of you right now, say Nick, and I come to Nick and I say, Nick, I want you to be depressed, grieve right now. I command you to be sad. He's smiling, by the way. We can't just conjure feelings, right? Feelings are a natural emotional response to something that's happening outside us. Now, if I, in turn, walked over and punched Nick in the face, maybe he would be sad or maybe he would be angry. And you know, again, an emotional response, a reaction that is just triggered. We don't have control over that. So if love is a feeling, how could Jesus possibly command that? It just doesn't make sense. From that, we understand that there must be something more going on. Yet, you know, in our society, again, going back to our culture, we tend to define love in terms of those feelings. We say, oh, she's fallen in love, right? Representing that someone has been smitten, they're infatuated. Because of an outward situation, they're having an inner feeling, an inner response. And even in that, it could be different aspects of love, right? It might be a romantic feeling, just that giddiness, that emotional high. It could be erotic. It could be just a sense that, oh, there's hope for me. Maybe I could have this long-lasting, mature relationship that is secure, a family bond. There are a lot of different aspects of that, even in that moment. But again, they're all this emotional response to something coming from the outside. What Jesus is talking about is something entirely different. Jesus defines love, I would suggest today, as a choice, not a feeling. How many are familiar with the term hypocrite? You know, we have a very specific definition for hypocrite in our society. Did you know that the term actually is a Greek word? It's a literal Greek word that is just anglicized and comes over into our culture from Greek culture. A hypocrite in the ancient Greek world was a play actor. They could play any kind of emotion, any kind of role. They could, literally, a good actor could shed tears on a moment's notice, whether they felt anything inside or not. They could laugh on cue. They could demonstrate joy or sorrow at any given moment. They could communicate love. They could communicate any number of emotions as a play actor. That's what they called a hypocrite. Because it wasn't inside. It wasn't who they were. They were just able to create that on a moment's notice. But again, that idea divorces from the cultural understanding, right? So we think that we are hypocrites if we don't feel something, but we're doing it anyway. Jesus tells us differently, and this is the most important thing that I'd like to share with you today. The fact that Jesus commands us to love, therefore defines love in a very different way than what our culture or even the Greek culture defined it. Love, if it's commanded, cannot possibly start with a feeling. Love must be based on something else. And I would like to suggest today that love is based upon a choice, an act of our will. We choose to obey a command, right? Just like someone might say stop, or someone might say just do it, or someone might say be quiet in a teaching setting. A command requires action, and it requires a choice. If a teacher tells their students to be quiet, they have to choose to be quiet. If they don't choose that, they won't be, even with the command, right? They'll be disobeying the command, and they may get in trouble as a result. But they have to choose, and then they have to act. And so I would like to suggest today that love, by definition, a biblical definition, not an American definition, not a Greek definition, love, according to Jesus, starts with a choice. And it is continued with an action that follows up that choice. It's an absolutely critical distinction that we need to make. I believe that we struggle as Americans, but as God's people, significantly with not just this command, but a lot of commands of God, because we don't feel like doing it. You know, Jesus says to us, forgive as I have forgiven you, right? But then we come back and say, I can't forgive that person. Why can't we? I don't feel forgiving. Well, again, it's not a matter of feeling, it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of action. We choose and then we act on that. But for some reason in our culture we've gotten this confused. We can't forgive because we don't feel forgiving. We feel, in fact, maybe hatred towards someone. But Jesus' commands are not based on feeling. They're based on a choice and then an action. And so when Jesus tells us to love even the unlovable, those people that are hard to love, sometimes we respond by saying, I just can't, Jesus. I don't feel love for this person. And Jesus, in this sense, would come back and tell us, it doesn't matter what you feel, because love is not a feeling. Love is a choice based on an action. Unfortunately, too often in our society today, relationships are defined in this way, and people leave marriages because they no longer feel that they're in love anymore. They've fallen out of love, I've heard people say in counseling settings. And I challenge them on that with this very idea. Jesus commands us to love. Now, he can't command a feeling no more easily than I can command Nick to be depressed. But if love is defined in another way, then that can, in fact, be commanded. We can command someone to act or to choose. Therefore, we see clearly that Jesus is defining love in this way. Now, as we look further into the Greek, we actually do see one term that reflects this idea. That term I mentioned a moment ago, agape. Now, interestingly, agape showed up very rarely in ancient Greek literature outside the Bible. Normal situations in daily life, in literature, in business, in the Greek culture, from the archaeology that we've seen up to this point, agape, this term agape, unconditional love that we define it as, shows up rarely. But in the Bible, it shows up all the time. It's one of the most common words used for love in the entire New Testament. That tells us that God is trying to define for us what love means in a very specific way. So what does agape mean in the Greek? Agape love, this is a quote from Chris Legg. I love this quote. Agape love is entirely about the one doing the loving. Now again, listen to that phraseology. Doing, it's an action, it's a choice. Agape love is entirely about the one doing the loving. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the one who is being loved. So it's not a response. It's not a feeling based upon what others are doing. It's a choice that I am making and acting on. Agape love in its purest form requires no payment or favor in response. In fact, agape love doesn't even require a response at all for it to continue. Agape love is not in any way dependent on circumstances or the responses of others. It says, I love you because I choose to. Agape means that I love you even if you hate me. Agape love means that even if you never respond, never repay, never return the favor, it doesn't matter. I'm going to continue to show love and to act in loving ways. Paul tells us this: God's love was shown in this, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Even though we were the ones that betrayed him, we were the ones that stabbed him in the back, we were the ones that put him in that position of suffering to begin with, he loved us and continues to do that, whether we respond or not. There are people, sadly, that will go to hell because they refuse to respond to God's love. That does not change his love for them one iota. He will still love them right up until the moment that they're separated from him. And I have seen that firsthand in hospice. God pursues people to their dying breath, hoping that they will respond, but loves them even if they never do. Again, if love was primarily a feeling or a reaction or a response, this kind of love wouldn't even be possible. But God in the Scriptures defines love in a very different way. And this is the foundation upon which we are then able to build our lives and build our future. Because if love is simply a response, then we have no hope. Now, if my love is strictly based on how you love me or respond to me, then what happens one day when you don't like me or you're upset with me or vice versa? Feelings are fickle. They change from sometimes minute to minute, even second to second, depending on what's going on around us, right? We get good news, we're happy. We get bad news, we're down. Things don't go our way, we're frustrated, we're angry. Someone treats us poorly, we want to smack them, right? But love is not based on what's going on around us, not biblical love. Love is a choice, according to Jesus, in spite of everything that's going on around us, good or bad. We choose to love. Now that we've established that love is a choice rather than a feeling, I'd like us to illustrate this using the story of the Good Samaritan, because that's what Jesus did. He defined love using this very parable. Remember, this parable comes out of the context of the most important commands in the entire Bible. Jesus says all of the scriptures are summed up in these two things: love God and love your neighbor. And then when this Pharisee asks him, okay, Jesus, but what does that mean? What does that look like? He gives this parable. It's incredibly profound. Let's think back again about what Jesus was saying here. How was it that the Samaritan acted? What choices did he make to define love for us? Number one, he stopped when other people didn't stop. I want us to really think about that. Simply being present for someone in need is a powerful demonstration of love. Now, those needs may look differently from day to day, from person to person. It may be that someone is grieving and they need a shoulder to cry on. It may be that their tire is flat on the side of the road and they need some physical help. It may be that they need a word of encouragement because things have been going badly in different areas of their lives. It could look so many different ways in so many different situations. But he stopped when no one else did. That's what God is looking for. He's looking for people who will stop for just a moment in their busy day, in their busy schedule, who will take the time to be present with people that need that love. The next thing we see the Samaritan does is all he can. He couldn't do everything. He couldn't heal the man. He wasn't Jesus. He couldn't, lay hands on him and boom, he was completely healed of his wounds instantly and miraculously. But he did all that he could. He took what medicine he did have and he cleansed the man's wounds, and he bandaged him as best he could with strips of cloth, maybe even tearing his own clothes to do that. And then he helped the man up as he spoke with him and encouraged him and helped him mentally and emotionally to get up onto his own donkey so that he could take him to the closest safe shelter, an inn. And then he took his own money, his own resources, and paid for the man's stay while he recovered. He couldn't do everything, but he did all that he could. That is love. That's what love looks like. When we know someone is in need, we find a way to help them at their point of need. That could be physically, it could be emotionally. Again, it could just be being present, being there, stopping long enough so that they know someone cares about them. The final thing that we see the Samaritan do is he really did sacrifice. And one of the key definitions of biblical love is sacrifice. Jesus himself said that there is no greater love than this, that someone lay down their life for their friend. Jesus spoke that to his disciples just before he went to the cross. He speaks that to us today because he was willing to sacrifice and still is sacrificing for us. We're told even now Jesus is praying for each and every one of us by name in heaven. He continues day in and day out to give his time to us. Love means sacrifice. It is a choice. It is an action. It's not a feeling. Sacrifice is not something that we feel like doing. Sacrifice is hard. It's painful sometimes. When we have to give up time, we have to give up money, we have to give of ourselves in some way. But that's what love looks like. We choose to do that because we love. And I would even go so far as to say that the degree that we are willing to sacrifice shows how much we love. I'm going to give a much more significant Christmas present to our kids than I am to my neighbor across the street. We'll probably bake some cookies or give a Christmas card to them, but I'm spending a lot of time and money investing in finding the right gifts for our kids because I love them more. The bond is stronger there. The degree to which we are willing to sacrifice shows the degree that we love. How is it that God is calling us to love others around us? Now, it doesn't look the same in every situation, in every relationship. But there are times when God does call us to give more. Like this time with the Samaritan. It was an immediate need, a crisis situation. He knew he needed to act. And he did. He stopped, he sacrificed, he gave of himself. His time, his money, his effort. It was hindering him from being able to get where he needed to go. He was scheduled to be there to meet someone. He was probably a merchant on his way to do business. This road that Jesus talked about was one of the most well-known roads traveling between Jericho and Jerusalem. He was a businessman. He had things to do. But he stopped and he sacrificed because that's what was called for at that moment. And Jesus says, this is the one that acted in love. Now you go and do likewise. And so I'd like to encourage you today as we reflect on this idea. What is love? Love is not primarily a feeling. Love, according to the Bible, is a choice that we make. And that choice is always followed up by action. Feelings will come, sure. We feel good when we can help other people. But sometimes it doesn't feel too good in the moment. Regardless of how it feels, we need to choose to obey Jesus' command. Love one another as I have loved you. Would you bow with me in prayer? Father, as we come before you today, we thank you that you have loved us before we loved you, unconditionally, and sacrificed, that you were present with us, that you did all it took to demonstrate and show that love in concrete ways. We thank you that we here have recognized that and responded. We pray, Lord, that you would help us to be people of love, that choose to act regardless of how we feel, according to your command, so that others might know that you love them as well. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.